The lonely 70-year-old rancher said, "Spread wider, I'm not stopping until my seed takes root." The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze moved through the tall grass. Birds were chirping, welcoming the new day, and the smell of fresh earth filled the air. The ranch, which had been in the family for generations, stretched for miles, with fences marking pastures and barns standing tall against the horizon. It was a place that carried memories of hard work, joy, and sometimes sorrow, but it was also a place of peace and comfort. Henry, the 70-year-old rancher, had been awake since before dawn. At his age, mornings were the best part of the day. There was a quietness in the air that felt like it belonged just to him and the land. He moved slowly but deliberately, each step a careful part of his routine that had been practiced for decades. His hands were worn and calloused from years of work, yet they moved with a gentle precision as he checked the fences and gates. The ranch was his life, and he treated every inch of it with care, knowing that every fence post, every patch of grass, and every barn had a story to tell. Henry walked toward the barn where his horses were kept. He could hear the soft nickering of the animals as they sensed his presence. They knew him well. One by one, he greeted each horse, scratching behind their ears and checking that they were healthy and ready for the day. These animals were not just livestock. They were his companions, friends that had shared countless days of sun and rain with him. He fed them, watching as they eagerly ate their breakfast, and felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were well cared for. After the horses were settled, Henry made his way to the chicken coop. The chickens clucked happily as he entered, ready for their morning feed. He scattered the grains carefully, taking a moment to enjoy the simple rhythm of life on the ranch. It was a life that many people didn't understand. Long hours, hard work, and little recognition. But to Henry, it was perfect. He had chosen this life long ago, and even now, decades later, he found a sense of fulfillment in the small, daily tasks that kept the ranch running. As the morning progressed, Henry walked through the fields, checking on the crops and the fences. Some parts of the land needed repair, and he made mental notes of what he would fix later. He enjoyed these walks. They gave him time to think and remember, and sometimes he talked quietly to himself or the animals. Memories of his younger days came back in flashes. The first time he rode a horse by himself, the long summer days spent planting and harvesting, and the nights spent by the fire with family. Although most of his family had moved away over the years, the ranch remained, a constant in a life that had changed in so many ways. Henry paused by a large oak tree in the center of the property. It had stood there for as long as he could remember, a silent witness to every season and every change on the ranch. He leaned against its sturdy trunk and looked out over the fields. There was a calmness in this moment that he cherished. It reminded him why he had stayed on the ranch all these years. It wasn't just the work or the land, it was the connection he felt to something greater than himself. The land had a rhythm, a heartbeat, and he felt that his life was intertwined with it. Despite the peace he found in his surroundings, Henry sometimes felt the weight of solitude. Friends had passed away, neighbors had moved, and the town had grown quieter over the years. There were moments when he missed companionship, someone to share his thoughts and experiences with. Yet, he never let loneliness take over. Instead, he focused on the life he could create each day, finding joy in small things. A perfectly tended garden, a clean barn, or a sunrise that looked as beautiful as the first one he had ever seen. By mid-morning, Henry was busy with chores around the barn. He repaired a broken gate, swept the floors, and organized tools. Each task was a part of the larger rhythm of the ranch, and he approached them with patience and care. Occasionally, he stopped to watch the sky or listen to the wind, remembering that life was not only about work, but also about observing and appreciating the world around him. His routine might have seemed simple to an outsider, but it was rich with meaning and satisfaction for him. Lunch was a quiet affair. Henry made himself a simple meal and sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the fields. He enjoyed the solitude, the way the sunlight streamed in, and the sounds of the animals in the distance. Sometimes he wrote letters to old friends, and other times he simply sat in silence, thinking about the day ahead. There was a comfort in this, a reminder that even in solitude, life could be full and rewarding. In the afternoon, Henry often took his truck and drove around the property, checking fences and water supplies for the cattle. He liked to make these rounds slowly, taking in the details that many might overlook, the way the grass swayed in the wind, the tracks of animals in the dirt, or the flowers growing near the creek. These small observations connected him to the land in a deep way. It reminded him that every element of the ranch had a role, a purpose, and that his care and attention helped maintain that balance. Sometimes, visitors would come by, neighbors or distant family members, but Henry didn't mind the quiet. He enjoyed company, but he also appreciated the independence and freedom that life on the ranch provided. It allowed him to live at his own pace, to make decisions for himself, and to experience life on his own terms. The ranch was not only his home, but also a sanctuary, a place where he could reflect on the past and dream about the future, even at 70 years old. As evening approached, Henry tended to the animals one last time. He fed the horses, collected eggs, and checked the barns. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows over the fields and painting the sky in warm shades of gold and purple. He paused to take it all in, feeling gratitude for another day lived fully. The work was never truly done, but there was beauty in the effort itself, in the knowledge that he was caring for something larger than himself. Night on the ranch was peaceful. Stars blanketed the sky, and the air was cool and fresh. Henry sat on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, listening to the sounds of the night. Owls hooted in the distance, and the occasional coyote could be heard, reminding him that life on the ranch was never truly quiet, but full of its own rhythms. He thought about the day and the work that still lay ahead, but he also felt content. He had spent the day tending to the land, caring for the animals, and finding moments of peace and reflection. That was enough for him. As he went to bed that night, Henry felt a sense of fulfillment. His body was tired from the day's work, but his spirit was full. He knew that tomorrow would bring more chores, more challenges, and perhaps moments of joy and reflection just like today. Life on the ranch was not always easy, but it was meaningful. And for Henry, at 70 years old, that was the greatest reward of all, the chance to live fully, in harmony with the land he loved, and to continue the legacy that had been passed down through generations. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a golden light across the fields. Henry woke up with a sense of purpose, even at 70. Age had brought him wisdom, patience, and a deeper connection with the land, but it had not dimmed his love for the ranch or the life he had built there. He took a deep breath as he stepped outside, feeling the cool morning air on his face, and looked around at the fields stretching endlessly before him. Everything seemed peaceful, yet full of promise for the day ahead. He started his morning routine by walking toward the barns. The horses greeted him with soft nickers, sensing the familiar rhythm of his steps. He checked each horse carefully, making sure they were healthy and strong. Their coats shone in the morning sunlight, and he ran his fingers along their manes, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Caring for the animals was more than work. It was a responsibility that Henry embraced fully. He had learned long ago that patience and gentle care went a long way, and the animals responded to him with trust and affection. After tending to the horses, Henry made his way to the chicken coop. The chickens were already awake, pecking at the ground and clucking softly. He scattered feed for them, pausing to enjoy the rhythm of their movements. Each cluck and flutter seemed to remind him that life, even in its simplest form, was full of patterns and meaning. He often thought about how every creature, no matter how small, had its role in the balance of the ranch. From the tiniest insect to the tallest horse, all were connected, and caring for them gave him a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Henry then walked to the garden behind the farmhouse. It was a small but carefully tended patch, filled with vegetables, herbs, and a few flowers he had planted over the years. Gardening was another form of therapy for him, a quiet activity that required patience and attention. He checked the soil, watered the plants, and removed any weeds that threatened to take over. As he worked, he thought about how much the garden reminded him of life itself. Growth required effort, patience, and care, but the rewards were always worth it. A thriving garden, much like a well-tended life, brought joy and satisfaction. By mid-morning, Henry decided to take a walk across the property. The ranch was vast, and each section had its own character. Some parts were filled with wildflowers, others with tall grasses swaying in the wind. Streams ran through a few areas, and the sound of flowing water was soothing. Henry walked slowly, taking in every detail: the patterns in the soil, the tracks of animals in the mud, the way the sunlight danced on the leaves of the trees. These walks were more than just inspections of the land. They were moments of reflection, times when he could connect with the world around him and feel the rhythm of life. During his walk, he stopped by an old fence that needed repair. Some of the posts had started to rot, and a few sections of wire were loose. Henry made a mental note to fix them later, knowing that maintaining the ranch was a constant task. It wasn't always easy, and it required strength, skill, and attention to detail. But Henry didn't see it as a burden. Every repair, every task was a chance to care for the land that had given him so much. The ranch was alive in its own way, and he felt honored to be a part of its story. As he continued, memories of his younger days came back to him. He remembered working alongside his father, learning the ways of the land. He remembered long summer days filled with planting, harvesting, and caring for animals. He remembered the sense of pride that came with completing hard work and the quiet satisfaction of seeing everything in order. Even though life had changed over the years, those memories were alive within him, guiding his hands and his decisions. He smiled quietly to himself, feeling grateful for the lessons and experiences that had shaped him. Lunch was a simple affair, as usual. Henry prepared a small meal, enjoying the quiet of the farmhouse. He ate slowly, savoring the flavors and the stillness around him. Sometimes he wrote letters to old friends, other times he simply sat and watched the animals in the distance. There was comfort in these moments of solitude, a reminder that life could be rich even without constant company. For Henry, contentment came from simple pleasures, the sight of healthy animals, the growth of his crops, and the knowledge that he had worked hard and done well. In the afternoon, Henry turned his attention to a project he had been planning for months. There was a section of the ranch that had been neglected over the years, a small area where the soil was dry and the grass sparse. He wanted to restore it, to bring life back to the land that had once been thriving. With determination, he began preparing the soil, turning it carefully and planning where he would plant seeds. He worked slowly and methodically, knowing that change would not happen overnight. Restoration required patience, dedication, and a vision for the future, qualities that Henry had in abundance. As he worked, he thought about the importance of perseverance. At 70 years old, many people might have chosen to slow down or take life easy, but Henry felt a deep sense of purpose. The land needed care, and he had the skills, knowledge, and desire to provide it. Each movement of the soil, each careful placement of a seed, was a testament to his commitment. He knew that growth, whether in a garden, a pasture, or in life itself, required effort, consistency, and care. These thoughts motivated him to keep going, even when the work was tiring. By late afternoon, the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of gold and pink, reflecting off the gentle curves of the land. Henry took a moment to pause, leaning on his shovel and looking out over the fields. There was a quiet beauty in this moment, a sense of connection to the land that went beyond work. It reminded him why he had chosen this life, why he had stayed on the ranch through every challenge and change. Life on the ranch was not always easy, but it was meaningful, and that meaning carried him through every day. As evening approached, Henry tended to the animals one last time. The horses were fed and groomed, the chickens settled in their coop, and the barns were secured. He walked slowly, enjoying the sounds of the ranch at dusk, the soft rustle of the wind through the grass, the gentle neighing of the horses, the occasional call of a bird returning to its nest. These sounds were familiar and comforting, reminders of the rhythm and continuity of life on the ranch. Dinner was another quiet moment. Henry cooked a simple meal and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the twilight landscape. He reflected on the day's work, feeling a quiet pride in what he had accomplished. The land was cared for, the animals were healthy, and the garden showed signs of new growth. These small successes, though ordinary to some, were meaningful to him. They represented the results of hard work, dedication, and love for the life he had chosen. After dinner, Henry took a short walk outside, breathing in the cool evening air. The stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling brightly above the ranch. He felt a sense of peace as he looked up, thinking about the passage of time and the cycles of life. The land, the animals, and the sky had been there long before him and would continue long after. His life was part of this larger story, and that thought filled him with contentment. Before going to bed, Henry spent some time reflecting on the future. He thought about the next day, the projects he wanted to complete, and the small improvements he hoped to make. Life on the ranch was continuous, each day bringing new tasks and challenges, but also new opportunities for growth and fulfillment. He felt ready to meet whatever tomorrow would bring, confident in his ability to care for the land and live a life of purpose. As he lay in bed, the quiet of the ranch surrounded him. The sounds of the night were gentle and soothing, a reminder that even in solitude he was never truly alone. The land was alive, the animals were thriving, and he had the knowledge and experience to keep everything in balance. With these thoughts, Henry closed his eyes, grateful for another day spent in harmony with the world he loved. Sleep came easily, bringing rest and renewal for the work and joy that awaited him with the next sunrise. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the ranch, spreading a warm, golden light across the fields. Henry woke up with the same sense of purpose that had guided him for decades. At 70, he knew the importance of keeping a routine, of moving with intention, and of appreciating every moment of life on the ranch. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and he met them all with patience and determination. He stepped outside onto the porch, inhaling the crisp morning air, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face. The land stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of green pastures, flowing streams, and rolling hills. He began the day by tending to the animals, as he always did. The horses greeted him warmly, nudging his hand for a gentle scratch. He checked their hooves, brushed their coats, and made sure their water troughs were full. Each horse had its own personality and quirks, and Henry enjoyed observing them closely. The animals had become his companions over the years, providing comfort, friendship, and sometimes even guidance. He whispered softly to them, telling them about his plans for the day, and they seemed to respond with quiet understanding. After the horses were settled, he went to the chicken coop. The chickens were busy clucking and pecking, moving around energetically in the fresh morning light. Henry scattered the feed evenly and watched as they hurried to eat, smiling at their lively movements. Even small, ordinary tasks like feeding the chickens brought him a sense of satisfaction. They reminded him that life had its simple pleasures, and that joy could be found in small, everyday moments. The rhythm of work, the connection with the animals, and the quiet presence of nature made each day meaningful in its own way. Henry then moved toward the vegetable garden behind the farmhouse. The plants were growing steadily, nurtured by his care and attention. He checked the soil, removed weeds, and watered the plants carefully, making sure each row had what it needed to thrive. Gardening had become more than a hobby. It was a meditation, a way for him to reflect on life while engaging in purposeful work. As he tended to the garden, he thought about the lessons he had learned over the years. Life, like a garden, required patience, diligence, and care. When tended properly, it could flourish in ways that brought immense satisfaction. By mid-morning, Henry decided to take a walk across the pastures. The ranch was vast, and he enjoyed these moments of quiet exploration. He walked slowly, observing the animals grazing, the movement of the wind through the grass, and the patterns of light and shadow that shifted across the land. These walks were not just physical, they were mental and emotional journeys. They allowed him to reflect on the past, appreciate the present, and plan for the future. Each footstep connected him to the earth beneath his feet, and he felt a sense of harmony that was difficult to find elsewhere. As he walked, he noticed a small patch of land that had been damaged by a recent storm. Branches had fallen, and some of the grass was flattened. Henry approached the area and began clearing debris, carefully removing broken branches and examining the soil. It would take time to restore this section, but he was committed to bringing it back to life. He thought about how the land, much like life itself, could face hardships and still recover with patience and effort. Restoring it was not only a task but a lesson in resilience, and he felt a quiet pride as he worked steadily to repair the damage. During his work, Henry paused to rest under a large oak tree. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade and a sense of stability. He leaned against the trunk, closing his eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the distant calls of birds, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the soft clopping of hooves. These moments of stillness were important to him. They reminded him that life was not just about constant activity. It was also about observation, reflection, and appreciation. He felt grateful for the quiet companionship of the land, which had always been a steady presence throughout his life. After resting, Henry returned to the task of repairing the storm-damaged area. He worked carefully, digging small trenches to help water flow, planting new grass seeds, and reinforcing the soil where needed. Each step required attention and patience, and he moved deliberately, knowing that rushing would not produce good results. The work was tiring, but it was also deeply rewarding. Henry felt a sense of accomplishment as he saw the progress he was making, and it reminded him that persistence and dedication were essential in all aspects of life. By early afternoon, Henry decided to take a break and enjoy a simple lunch. He prepared a modest meal, sitting at the kitchen table while gazing out the window at the fields. The sunlight illuminated the farmhouse, casting warm shadows across the room. He ate slowly, savoring the flavors and the calmness around him. Sometimes he thought about the years that had passed, the friends and family who had come and gone, and the experiences that had shaped his life. Though time had brought change, he found comfort in the continuity of the ranch and the daily routines that grounded him. After lunch, Henry turned his attention to the fences around the property. Some sections had begun to sag, and a few posts needed replacement. He worked carefully, using tools that had been in the family for years, and made sure each repair was solid. Fences were not just physical barriers. They represented order, safety, and care for the animals. Maintaining them was essential, and Henry took pride in the precision and effort required. Each repaired fence was a small victory, a reminder that careful work produced lasting results. Later in the afternoon, Henry walked to a small creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the gentle sound of the flowing stream was soothing. He paused to observe the wildlife that visited the creek, birds drinking water, fish swimming, and small animals moving cautiously along the banks. These moments were peaceful and inspiring, reminding him of the delicate balance of nature. He thought about how every creature, every plant, and every drop of water played a role in the ecosystem of the ranch. His work was part of that balance, and he felt honored to contribute to it. As evening approached, Henry began his final rounds of the day. He fed the animals one last time, checked the barns, and ensured that everything was in order. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun set behind the hills. Henry paused for a moment, leaning on the fence and taking in the beauty of the scene. There was a deep sense of satisfaction in completing the day's work, knowing that the animals were cared for, the land was tended, and everything was prepared for tomorrow. The ranch had a rhythm, and he was proud to be a part of it. Dinner was simple as usual. Henry enjoyed a quiet meal while reflecting on the day. He thought about the tasks he had accomplished, the challenges he had faced, and the progress he had made in restoring the land. Life on the ranch was never easy, but it was meaningful, and every day brought a sense of purpose. He felt grateful for the health, strength, and determination that allowed him to continue working and caring for the place he loved. After dinner, Henry took a short walk outside under the starry sky. The air was cool and fresh, and the sounds of the ranch at night were comforting. He listened to the owls calling, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional distant sound of animals moving. These moments reminded him that life continued in cycles, and that each day brought new opportunities and experiences. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had done his best and that the ranch was thriving under his care. Before going to bed, Henry spent some time reflecting on the future. He thought about the projects he wanted to complete, the improvements he hoped to make, and the ongoing care the ranch would require. Though he was older, he felt a strong sense of capability and purpose. Life was a continuous journey, and he embraced each day with determination, patience, and gratitude. With these thoughts, he prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of work, reflection, and quiet joy on the ranch. As he lay in bed, the gentle sounds of the night surrounded him. The wind rustled through the trees, the creek flowed softly in the distance, and the animals were settled for the night. Henry felt a deep sense of contentment. His life was simple but rich with meaning, filled with purpose, connection, and the satisfaction of hard work. Sleep came easily, bringing rest and renewal for another day on the land he loved so dearly. Morning arrived quietly on the ranch, with the first light of dawn spilling across the fields. Henry rose as usual, feeling the calm energy of a new day. Even at 70, he maintained a rhythm that brought both discipline and comfort to his life. The land was alive with sounds, the rustle of the wind in the grass, the distant chirping of birds, and the gentle movements of animals beginning their day. Henry stepped outside, letting the fresh air fill his lungs, and took a moment to appreciate the peace that surrounded him. This was a routine he had followed for decades, but each day felt fresh, unique, and full of potential. He began his morning by walking to the horse stables. The horses greeted him warmly, recognizing the familiar rhythm of his steps and the gentle tone of his voice. He checked each horse carefully, examining their coats, hooves, and overall health. He brushed them thoroughly, enjoying the way the animals leaned into his touch. Caring for the horses was more than responsibility, it was companionship. They were loyal, understanding creatures that had shared countless days with him, and he felt a deep connection with each one. Their presence reminded him of the importance of consistency, patience, and gentleness. After ensuring the horses were well fed and comfortable, Henry turned his attention to the chicken coop. The chickens moved energetically, pecking at the ground and clucking softly. He spread the feed evenly, pausing to watch their playful interactions. Simple chores like these were grounding. They reminded him that life did not always need to be complicated to be meaningful. He smiled quietly, observing how the animals worked together in their small community, each playing a role in the rhythm of the ranch. It was a lesson in harmony and balance, one that he often reflected upon in his own life. Henry then walked toward the garden behind the farmhouse. The plants had grown steadily under his care, and he was proud of the progress they had made. He watered each row, removed weeds, and carefully checked the soil. Gardening was a meditative practice for him, a quiet way to connect with life and nature. Each seed planted was a small promise of the future, and each sprout that grew was proof of patience and dedication paying off. Henry often thought about how much gardening mirrored life. Growth required effort, care, and attention, but it also brought joy and fulfillment in unexpected ways. By mid-morning, Henry decided to take a longer walk across the ranch. He enjoyed moving through the wide open spaces, observing the details that others might overlook. Tracks in the soil told stories of animals that had passed by, while patterns in the grass and trees revealed the changing seasons. He appreciated the way the sun glinted on the water in the creek, the gentle sway of the leaves in the trees, and the distant hills that rolled across the horizon. These walks were not just practical inspections of the land. They were moments of reflection, meditation, and connection. They reminded him of the beauty, continuity, and resilience of life. While walking, he noticed a section of the pasture where the grass was sparse and uneven. Some areas had been trampled by the cattle, while others had been neglected for too long. Henry knelt down to examine the soil and made mental notes of the improvements needed. He planned to replant seeds, adjust watering paths, and carefully monitor the area in the coming days. For Henry, such work was not a burden but a responsibility he cherished. It was a way of giving back to the land, ensuring that it remained healthy and productive for years to come. He understood that with effort and care, even neglected spaces could be restored to vitality. After tending to the pasture, Henry took a break under the shade of a large oak tree. The tree had stood for generations, a silent witness to the ranch's history. He leaned against its sturdy trunk, letting the cool shade ease his muscles, and gazed across the fields. Memories of his youth surfaced. The long days working alongside his father, the laughter of friends and neighbors, and the quiet moments of solitude when he learned to appreciate the rhythm of nature. The ranch held countless stories, and Henry felt grateful for every experience it had given him. In the stillness of that afternoon, he felt a sense of connection to both the past and the present, understanding that life was a continuous journey shaped by care, effort, and attention. By late morning, Henry returned to the farmhouse to prepare a simple lunch. As he ate, he reflected on the projects he had planned for the day. There was a fence that needed repair, a small section of the garden that required extra attention, and a water trough that needed cleaning. Each task, while ordinary, carried meaning because it contributed to the balance and sustainability of the ranch. Henry had learned long ago that consistent, mindful work was the foundation of a fulfilling life. No task was too small, and no effort was wasted. After lunch, Henry set out to repair the fence that had been damaged by the recent storms. He gathered his tools and worked carefully, measuring and adjusting posts, tightening wires, and ensuring the structure was strong. Each movement was deliberate, reflecting the skill and patience he had developed over decades of working the land. As he worked, he thought about the importance of perseverance. Life, like a fence, required maintenance, attention, and dedication. By taking small, consistent actions, Henry knew he could ensure the ranch remained strong and resilient. In the afternoon, Henry turned his attention to a small orchard he had planted years ago. The trees were growing steadily, and he inspected each one for signs of disease or pests. He pruned branches, cleared the ground of fallen leaves, and watered the roots carefully. The orchard was a labor of love, a symbol of growth and long-term investment. Each tree represented years of effort, patience, and learning. Henry often felt a quiet satisfaction seeing the fruits of his labor flourish, knowing that the seeds he had planted would continue to grow and thrive, even after he was gone. As evening approached, Henry completed his final rounds of the day. He fed the animals, checked water sources, and ensured that the barns were secure. The sky was a brilliant canvas of oranges, purples, and golds, reflecting off the rolling hills and open fields. He paused for a moment, leaning against a fence and taking in the view. Each day ended with a quiet sense of accomplishment, a recognition that his work, though sometimes tiring, was meaningful and necessary. The ranch had a rhythm, and he was proud to play his part in maintaining it. Dinner was a quiet moment of reflection and rest. Henry prepared a simple meal and sat by the window, watching the sunset. He thought about the day's accomplishments and the work that still lay ahead. Life on the ranch was continuous, filled with both challenges and rewards. Henry felt gratitude for the strength, wisdom, and determination that allowed him to continue caring for the land he loved. Each day was a gift, and he embraced it fully, knowing that the simple acts of work, observation, and care created a life rich with purpose. After dinner, Henry took a walk outside under the emerging stars. The night air was cool and fragrant, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and grass. He listened to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle flowing of the creek. These nights reminded him that life was composed of cycles, each day bringing opportunities for work, reflection, and appreciation. He felt a deep sense of connection to the land and the creatures that lived on it, understanding that every element played a role in the harmony of the ranch. Before going to bed, Henry reflected on the lessons of the day. He thought about the importance of care, consistency, and patience in every aspect of life. He thought about how his efforts, though sometimes small, contributed to something larger than himself. The land, the animals, and the structures of the ranch depended on his diligence, and he felt honored to be a part of that ongoing story. With these thoughts, he prepared for sleep, content in the knowledge that he had lived the day with purpose and care. As he drifted off, Henry felt a quiet peace settle over him. The ranch was alive with its nighttime rhythm, the animals rested, and the fields awaited the dawn. He had spent the day fully, working, observing, and reflecting, and he knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys. Life on the ranch was simple but meaningful, and Henry felt grateful for every moment he was able to experience it. Sleep came easily, bringing rest and renewal for the next day of tending to the land he loved so dearly. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields. Henry woke up feeling the familiar sense of purpose that had guided him for decades. At 70, his body was slower than it once had been, but his mind remained sharp, and his spirit was as determined as ever. Each day was an opportunity to care for the land, tend to the animals, and reflect on a life lived fully. He stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air, and looked over the ranch he had devoted so many years to. The land stretched endlessly, bathed in golden light, and he felt a quiet pride in what he had maintained and nurtured. He began his morning routine by checking on the horses. They greeted him with soft nickers, moving close as he approached. Henry ran his hands over their coats, feeling the warmth of their bodies and the strength in their muscles. He checked their hooves, ensuring that each was healthy, and gave them their morning feed. The horses had been his companions for many years, and caring for them brought a deep sense of fulfillment. Their presence reminded him that relationships, even with animals, required attention, patience, and kindness. After tending to the horses, he moved to the chicken coop. The chickens were lively, clucking and pecking at the feed he had spread for them. Henry watched them with quiet amusement, noting how each bird had its own personality and habits. These small creatures reminded him of the rhythm of life, the importance of routine, care, and observation. Even the simplest tasks could bring satisfaction if approached with thoughtfulness and love. The chickens were more than animals. They were part of the daily rhythm that gave his life structure and meaning. Next, Henry went to the vegetable garden. The plants had grown steadily under his care, producing healthy vegetables and vibrant flowers. He checked the soil, removed weeds, and carefully watered each row. Gardening was a form of meditation for him, a way to slow down and observe life closely. Each sprout that pushed through the soil was a reminder that growth took time, effort, and attention. He often reflected on how this mirrored life itself. Patience and consistent care led to thriving results. The garden was a living testament to the values he had practiced throughout his life. By mid-morning, Henry decided to walk across the ranch, inspecting the land and enjoying the quiet beauty around him. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, the sun shone brightly on the rolling hills, and the creek sparkled as it wound through the fields. Henry noticed small details, the tracks of wildlife in the soil, the way light reflected off the leaves, and the subtle sounds of birds hidden in the trees. These walks were moments of connection, a chance to appreciate the intricate balance of life around him. He understood that caring for the ranch was more than physical labor. It was an ongoing conversation with nature, a way to maintain harmony and respect for every living thing. While walking, he came across a section of the pasture where the grass had begun to thin. The area needed replanting and some care to restore it to its former health. Henry knelt to examine the soil, noting its dryness and the small patches of exposed earth. He began to work, loosening the soil and preparing it for new seeds. Each movement was deliberate and careful, reflecting years of experience. For Henry, restoring the land was not just about physical work. It was a reminder that even areas that seemed worn or neglected could thrive again with patience and effort. It was a lesson in resilience, both for the land and for life itself. As the morning passed into afternoon, Henry returned to the farmhouse for a simple lunch. He sat by the window, looking out over the fields while eating slowly. The quiet moments like these were a chance to reflect on the past and consider the future. He thought about the many years he had spent on the ranch, the challenges he had faced, and the small victories that made life meaningful. Though age had slowed him physically, it had also brought perspective and wisdom. He understood that fulfillment came not from grand gestures, but from consistent, careful attention to the things that mattered most. After lunch, Henry focused on repairing a fence that had weakened over time. He gathered his tools and worked steadily, ensuring each post was secure and each wire properly tightened. Fences were more than barriers. They represented safety, order, and care for the animals. Maintaining them required diligence, and Henry took pride in the precision of his work. As he hammered and adjusted, he reflected on the broader meaning of his labor. Every action he took on the ranch contributed to a balance that sustained life, a rhythm that he had nurtured for decades. Later, he went to check on the orchard he had planted many years ago. The trees were strong, their branches heavy with leaves and early fruit. Henry examined each tree, pruning as needed and clearing debris from the ground. The orchard had always been a source of pride for him, representing long-term planning and the rewards of patient effort. Each tree told a story of seasons past, storms weathered, and careful attention paid. He felt a deep satisfaction knowing that his work had created something enduring, something that would continue to thrive beyond his own lifetime. As the afternoon wore on, Henry completed his rounds of the animals. The horses were fed and groomed, the chickens settled in their coop, and the barns were secured. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows and bathing the ranch in warm, golden light. He paused for a moment, leaning on a fence and looking out across the fields. Each day ended with a quiet sense of accomplishment, a recognition that life's value was measured in dedication, care, and the small acts that maintained balance and harmony. Dinner was a quiet moment of reflection. Henry prepared a simple meal and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sun set behind the hills. He thought about the day's work and the ongoing projects that awaited him. Life on the ranch was continuous, full of both effort and reward. Each task, though ordinary in appearance, held deeper significance. Through his work, he maintained not only the land but a connection to life, family legacy, and the natural world. Henry felt grateful for the health, energy, and wisdom that allowed him to continue living fully, even at 70 years old. As night fell, Henry took a short walk outside. The stars appeared one by one, twinkling in the clear sky. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. He listened to the gentle sounds of the ranch, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, and the soft movement of the creek. These nights reminded him that life was a cycle, each day connected to the next, each season bringing its own challenges and rewards. He felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude for the world around him, for the land he had cared for, and for the life he had lived. Before going to bed, Henry reflected on his journey. He thought about the years of hard work, the lessons learned, and the quiet moments of joy and reflection. He remembered the times he had faced challenges, overcome difficulties, and nurtured growth both in the land and in himself. Life on the ranch had taught him patience, resilience, and the importance of living with intention. Each day had been an opportunity to learn, to care, and to leave a lasting mark. As he lay in bed that night, the quiet of the ranch surrounded him. He thought about the legacy of the land, the animals, and the work he had devoted himself to. Sleep came easily, bringing rest and renewal. He felt satisfaction in knowing that he had lived fully, embraced his responsibilities, and found meaning in simple, consistent actions. The ranch was thriving, the animals were healthy, and the land was cared for. In that moment, Henry understood that a life well lived was measured not by wealth or recognition, but by dedication, purpose, and the love poured into every day. The next morning, Henry awoke with renewed energy. He stepped outside and looked over the fields, feeling the same joy he had felt every morning for decades. He knew there would be more work ahead, but he also knew that each task, each moment, contributed to a life of purpose. He walked to the stables, feeding the horses and greeting them warmly. He tended to the chickens, checked the garden, and made plans for improving the orchard. Each action was part of the rhythm that gave his life meaning. By midday, he took a break to sit beneath his favorite oak tree. He reflected on the cycles of life, the importance of resilience, and the beauty of consistency. Even at 70, he found fulfillment in small tasks and simple pleasures. The sun warmed his back, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above him. He smiled, feeling grateful for the gift of life and the ability to continue nurturing the land he loved so deeply. As the day ended, Henry completed his final rounds of chores. He ensured the animals were fed, the barns secured, and the fences repaired. The sky was ablaze with the colors of sunset, and he paused to take it all in. The ranch, the animals, and the land had become extensions of his life, and he felt proud of the harmony he had maintained. Dinner was quiet and satisfying, followed by a short walk under the stars. Finally, he retired to bed, resting peacefully with the knowledge that he had lived fully, cared deeply, and left a lasting mark on the world around him.